Reagan, thank you for that introduction. It really is a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Jim and the entire executive team at KACo for the invitation to speak to you all today. And it really is a pleasure to see a lot of friends today throughout the state that I've known over the last roughly 10 years. Folks from my home county of Edmonson County and Warren County where I live now, but also folks from places all over the state, and especially those from Hart County, Judge Turner, you and your magistrates, Judge Choate down in Hart County, you and your magistrates who sent me to the General Assembly originally in 2011 to serve you all. So it's a pleasure to see all of you all. And you know, I took this role after being asked by the leadership team, Speaker Osborne, earlier this year in January. And in the roughly 9-10 months that I've served as chair of the local government committee, I've been trying to figure out why they pinpointed me for that position. I'd served as a ranking member of the committee for a while when we were in the minority. That might have been part of it. But I also, I do represent an interesting part of the Commonwealth, because with the diversity that we see across Kentucky, from small counties to large counties, suburban, urban areas to rural areas, I represent one of the 5 largest counties in Kentucky, as well as one of the 20 smallest counties in Kentucky. And so I have an interesting perspective. But I think I may have settled on what the real reason is. And that's because more and more often I find myself, and Judge Henderson, I think you can commiserate a little bit with me on this, finding myself refereeing cities and counties in Kentucky. And I happen to have a lot of experience with that because my dad's a mayor and my wife is an assistant county attorney, so I have to do that at home as well. And so I think I've got some unique perspectives on how to deal with both cities and counties, local governments across the state because of my direct experiences. But as Reagan said, and there'll be some overlap in some of the speakers that you've heard already this morning, from President Stivers to your panel on transportation with Representative Santoro and others, Senator Harris, on some of the issues that we're talking about, because I think the issues that are all coming to be important right now all do craft back to some of the same major issues that we find ourselves not just needing to address, but they're necessary for us to address now. And so, really, what are those? Jails, infrastructure, job growth, and all those things circle back together to the issue of revenue and how you come up with the money to fund those essential and mandated services that you have to fund as county governments across the state. We must address criminal justice reform and local jails from a holistic approach. At a recent interim joint committee meeting, Secretary Tilley, Secretary of the Justice Cabinet, made the comment that we must start incarcerating people who are a danger to themselves and others, and not those that we're just mad at. And I think that's a realistic thing that we have to look at going forward. Since my time in the General Assembly over the last 9 years, we've dealt with criminal justice reform at least every couple of years since I've been there, because the costs have just ballooned at both the state and local level. But most of the efforts that we've taken so far have been to relieve the state of the financial burden that we're seeing in our state prisons. By doing that, we have shifted a burden down to you at the county level by moving felony convictions down to misdemeanor convictions that you all are having to house in your local jails. They were significant, but on top of shifting the burden onto you all, they've also pushed people into, a lot of times, accepting a felony conviction instead of a misdemeanor conviction because they serve less time in a state prison or under a state conviction. These have been long-term challenges, though, folks. I would venture to say that over the history of our jail funding issues, for most of my life, I'm 34 years old, and for most of my life, we've been struggling with these problems, and we've never really solved them, and it's time that we must solve these issues. We can't put them on the back burner anymore. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. There's no silver bullet that we can come up with, but it's going to take some hard decisions and some very dedicated effort to come up with the solutions that we can move forward on. I can tell you that I don't think there's maybe one county in the state, but out of 120 counties, I think there's probably 1 or 2 counties in the state that see jails as a money-making enterprise anymore. I don't think anybody sees that as a realistic thing across the state. I also think that that building more beds, building larger jails is not the solution as we move forward into the future. And I also really struggle with the fact that when somebody is breaking that law, whether it be a misdemeanor or whether it be a felony, they're breaking a state law that we've created in the General Assembly. They're sentenced by a judge who's a state official. But yet your role as a county is you get to pay the bill. And that's really your only role in the process. You know, another thing that has changed drastically with our jail population in Kentucky is the types of prisoners that we have. I would venture a guess that every jailer in Kentucky wishes they could go back to the days where you had Otis from the Andy Griffith Show as the folks that you're incarcerating in your jail. But that's not realistic anymore. The people that we have jailed in our county jails today and in our state prisons are there because they're addicted to opioids or other illegal substances. They've trafficked opioids or other drugs. They've stolen to pay for drugs, or even some have killed over a drug deal. That's a big part of the population we see in our jails and our state prisons. But let's not forget, we've also made a lot of decisions over the last 20 or 30 years about trying to not institutionalize people with severe mental health problems. And what we've seen is, we're seeing a lot of those people in your county jails right now. It's been estimated, and statistics have supported this from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, that approximately 15% of men and 30% of women nationwide who are incarcerated have a severe mental health problem. And many times their treatment is costing you more and more money, and if they go untreated, they become a danger to themselves, other inmates, or the folks who are working in your jails. And we don't have a solution to that problem, and we must push forward to try to find a better solution to that problem. But the bottom line is our jails are filled with people with higher mental health and medical costs each and every day, and we've got to find a solution in the coming year or years at least. Whether you're a county facing overcrowding issues, or whether you're a county with a closed jail that's paying another county to house your prisoners, the funding crisis in our jails is real. And I can tell you that it's my view, and I've had conversations with Speaker Osborne as well, and he shares this view, that this is an issue that we can't let go on any longer. We must address it now. Shelley, Jim, and your team know that we've already dedicated 2 meetings of our interim committee on local government this summer to this issue, and we will continue that as we move forward into the coming session. Lots of topics will be shared on how to fix that issue. There'll be issues where we talk about pretrial services and how to head off some of the issues pre-trial, the cash bail system in Kentucky, the arrangement of state prisoners being held in our county jails at a rate that's not paying the full cost of them being there, but also not providing any services for their reentry or their treatment. But we can't solve that problem by ourselves. We've tried to ask a lot of different groups to come to the table, and over the coming months we're going to continue to do that. And we want your buy-in with it. And some of these decisions will be painful, more than likely, but we can't be successful if we don't have your help as we move forward. Second area of significant issue that I see coming in the session, and you've already had a presentation on this, like I said, with the infrastructure group and panel that you had earlier today, but we really have a huge amount of challenges coming in that realm. We have a growing list of road and bridge projects across the state that need our attention. They're aging, it's crumbling infrastructure from the 60s and the 70s or earlier that just, they have to have help. But we also have a historically low amount of revenue coming in to fund those priorities. President Stivers mentioned it quite heavily in his speech, but we've benefited over the years from a transportation funding initiative that was off the gas tax. And as citizens of this state, we've benefited off of it because we're a pass-through state. And about 60% of the revenue that has come in through the gas tax has been paid by people who are driving through Kentucky, not by Kentucky residents. But as we continue to see hybrid vehicles proliferate, more and more of those on the road, we've got to find a way to get them paying some of their freight on our highways. We've also used all of the toll credit money that we can use at this point. And that's going to be about a $100 million hit to our road fund every year into the future that we've been able to enjoy in the past. And so we're going to have to look at new formulas, new mechanisms for collecting road dollars, and also how we allocate those at both the state and the local level. And we need your partnership on that. You all know as county officials that one of the biggest challenges that we have is continued job growth. Because if you go to the suburban and urban areas of our group, and the census has mentioned this, you'll see growth in many of those counties where we have suburban, urban areas where we have growing populations, and they're going to benefit from a strong national economy. But lots of rural Kentucky is really struggling still, whether it be in the far east or the far west, outside the I-75 and I-65 corridors. We continue to struggle to grow jobs, and we have a role in helping you grow those jobs. We must create and continue the reforms that we've done in the past with the tax code to try to locate companies here in the Commonwealth. We also have to make sure that that tax code is elastic, because we've got a lot of challenges coming and a lot of changes in the way that people spend their money that we're not equipped to handle right now. And we've got to make sure they're elastic so we can take advantage of those 21st century global economies that we head into. And we've seen positive results from some of the changes that we've done, but we've got to continue that path forward. But we can't let the state tax reform efforts infringe on your local taxing efforts. Because with pensions and jails and the funding crisis that you have right now, we have to protect county's baseline revenue in anything that we do. I think we also have to put more emphasis on innovative approaches. We need to be more, to work more towards the Promise Zone initiatives that bring companies and provide incentives to companies for coming to our rural and economically depressed areas. We need to focus more on growing our small businesses, because small business growth is really growth across our economy. And we need to focus on tourism, like President Stivers mentioned in his remarks, to grow those areas out in the western and eastern parts of Kentucky. But we also need to focus on infrastructure other than roads as we plan for the growing economy. We need to make sure that we have water and sewer in places where it's necessary, and we need to continue efforts to get broadband across the state. And I really do believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. And if we all work together, we can make sure that no corner of the Commonwealth is left behind in our job growth efforts. And finally, and the last issue that I want to mention, and it really ties all of them back together, is the issue of revenue. We have to address that at the local level as well, like we have on the state level to some degree. We need to make sure that we incentivize at the state level shared services, not combined governments. Because when we work together, we can get better buying power and better prices on projects. It's my view that the state has to adopt a set of guidelines for revenue options at the local level that provide a lot of flexibility. We need to make sure that they don't run off businesses when they're looking at our area, but we also need to make sure that you all as county officials get to kind of chart your own course. Because you know better than me or my colleagues in Frankfort, the bureaucrats that are in Frankfort, you all know what your community will and will not accept when it comes to taxation and bringing in local revenue. And we need to give you more ability to have that flexibility. We also need to streamline that bidding process so that when you all come together to work as local governments, whether it be cities and counties coming together, neighboring counties working together, we need to make that process easier for you all. The interlocal agreement process is important. It was a good first step, but it should be streamlined and made easier so that you all can work together, get better dollars used, and make the best decisions you can to grow your buying power amongst yourselves and other local governments. And I do think, and I was happy to hear President Stivers mention this issue, we do need to look at more of a consumption-based tax, not just at the state level, but at the local level as well. Because as we move forward into the future, less and less people are purchasing property. And that's been a source that you all have been dependent on for many, many years. And as that trend continues with the millennials, we need to find a way to replace that. Even though there's going to be renters out there who are paying tax baked into their rent payments, they're not engaged taxpayers in your community. You're getting a tax from a smaller group of people, the developers and the real estate management companies. We need to keep that in mind as we move forward into the future. We also need to understand that, especially in some of our larger communities in Kentucky, that the occupational tax has been a struggle for them as they have tried to recruit headquarters type operations, whether that's Northern Kentucky, whether it's Jefferson County, Fayette County, and some of the other larger communities. Their executives teams look at the cost of doing business for those high salary individuals who they are employing in those headquarters operations when they come. And our occupational and corporate and state income tax has been something that's not been beneficial to those organizations as they've looked at our state. And so we need a broader based system of taxation with the sales tax. It will take a lot of work to get there. It takes a constitutional amendment. We know that. We're looking out towards that as we speak. But we're going to need your help on all of these issues. Because as we begin all of these discussions, we can't be successful if we don't have your buy-in and your support. Because you all know, you all are where the rubber meets the road every day in our communities. And what works in one community doesn't work in another. You already have an array of different issues. The under 30,000 issue was brought up. We've got to find a way to standardize, but also provide flexibility so that you can do what works for your community and not just what somebody in Frankfort is dictating that you do in your community. I thank you all for being here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you for a few minutes here. If I've got time, I could open it up for fiscal questions. We'll move right along then. That'll be fine. Thank you all very much.